The Capcom crossover fighting games are often considered some of the greatest and most important fighting games that have ever been made. The company's collaboration with Marvel and later SNK are now both considered the stuff of legends. But have you ever played the other Capcom vs game?
What the hell is even that?
That's right, away from the dream games that would feature the cast of Street Fighter clashing with Marvel superheroes, and the titles where Chun-Li would square off with Mai Shiranui, exists another crossover that feels a little more random. So with all of that said, join me today as we visit the weirdest Capcom collab of all, as we take a trip through time to look at Tatsunoko vs Capcom Ultimate All-Stars. In fact, what the bloody hell is a Tatsunoko? So let's explore. Holding these thoughts, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is Tatsunoko vs Capcom, the other crossover fighting game. Yeah. The mid-noughties was a strange time for Capcom fighting games. While the company had two great crossover series under their belt, fans were left wondering what next exciting project would be brought to the table, with our question being answered in 2004, when the decision was made to create Capcom vs Capcom. Titled Capcom Fighting Evolution, this was a shoddily put together rush job made from the crumbling remains of a cancelled 3D fighting game, which was being worked on in the previous year, known as Capcom Fighting All-Stars. The cancellation of Fighting All-Stars, followed by the failings of Capcom Fighting Evolution, meant that this would be Capcom's last crossover fighting game for quite some time, and seemingly the end of Capcom producing brand new sprite-based fighting games altogether. After a period of hibernation, things would all change drastically with the release of Street Fighter 4 in the arcade in 2008, a game that, with its upgrades and reiterations, would go on to sell over 9 million units, making it Capcom's most popular fighting game since the release of the legendary Street Fighter 2. But during the development of Street Fighter 4, it was not the only fighting game project the company had in the works. We would also get the lunacy that is Tatsunoko vs Capcom, a fighter full of your Capcom favourites, mixed with a bunch of bizarre spandex-clad superheroes and massive fighting robots. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not get much more Japanese than this, so let's break down what the Tatsunoko brand even is. Tatsunoko is a Japanese production company, originally established in 1962. The anime pioneer's first big hit was a TV series released in 1965 known as Space Ace. Since then, the company have gone on to produce countless anime TV shows and movies, which is the source material from where a lot of the members in the game on the Tatsunoko side of things originated from. The Tatsunoko fighters joined the Capcom legends in tag team action, once again making this one a hot favourite of Teddy Long. Holla holla holla! Straight away you will notice that this game varies greatly graphically from most previous Capcom vs fighting games, as all of the characters in the game are fully rendered in 3D. Fights take place within a 2.5D environment, as like future Capcom fighting games like Street Fighter 6 for example, 3D looking characters are restricted to a two-dimensional plane. Like in prior Capcom crossovers, the player selects two fighters who are completely switchable during matches. As expected by this point, powerful team moves can be performed by these pairs, such as assists. However, in addition to this familiarity, a completely new mechanic has been introduced to the game. This is to compensate for the two giant characters who are included in this one. These two bigger, more powerful fighters can be chosen individually to use instead of a two-person team, adding a little bit of interesting variety to this affair. The arcade version of this game has a control scheme consisting of a joystick and a multi-button layout. However, the console controls would be simplified, which we should touch a bit more on shortly. In all versions of the game, in addition to assists, characters can perform light, medium and strong attacks, and these attacks can be strung together to perform combos. Characters can also pull off what are known as universal techniques. These are more powerful special attacks that require more complex control inputs. Further from this, other input combinations can also be used to perform hyper combos and team hyper combos, which vary in damage depending on how full the player's hyper combo gauge is. Going back to universal techniques, these can be used to launch opponents upwards to perform air combos. Universal techniques also include the Baroque combo, which does significant damage but reduces the player's health, and the Mega Crash technique, which drains the user's life bar but functions as a temporary barrier around the player. The ball of the production of this game began to roll in 2006, when Tatsunoko themselves approached Capcom with the suggestion of creating a game using their character library. Ryota Nitsuma, producer at Capcom, was instantly interested in creating a fighting game and quickly got everyone on board at the two companies to agree to use Tatsunoko within the next Capcom vs fighting title. This project was a particularly interesting one, as there would be a 7-year gap between the release of this title and the last true crossover published by the company, Capcom vs SNK 2. The research and development team working on this title began work on the project in parallel with Street Fighter 4, with the ambitious aim of bringing Capcom fighting games back to the mainstream market. This was hoped to be achieved by slightly lowering the barrier for entry with the game, as the company had noticed an unprofitable trend where only extremely hardcore fans were still heavily invested in playing fighting games. These people took fighting games a lot more seriously than those who made up the market where the money actually was, hence why Street Fighter 3 was so beloved by serious players at the time but ignored by the mass market. Through the early noughties, fighting games were dropping in popularity. The casual market though was growing larger than ever, with the Nintendo Wii proving to the world there was a huge market out there for more simplistic games. For this reason, the arcade game development would be shifted with a future console release on the Nintendo Wii in mind. Capcom hired the development house known as 18, and they were tasked with the development of this game. Nitsuma is quoted to have stated, 18, Capcom's hired developer, took on the job in early 2007. Tatsunoko vs Capcom's design was a departure from the complex attack systems of the Street Fighter series and of certain Versus titles. The game is built around a simplified 3-button attack system. It was inspired by the control systems commonly used by both the Versus series and the Wii, which allows intricate moves to be performed with basic control inputs. The game's release would finally be announced in May of 2008, with a release set for the Japanese arcades. The arcade cabinets contain boards that use proprietary hardware based on the Nintendo Wii. The game was 70% ready by September of that year, with a Japanese release on the Wii also announced. They confirmed the game would eventually hit the Japanese arcade in December of that same year. When creating this game, although Tatsunoko characters could be nominated by Capcom to use, they soon realised that they faced limitations, as certain characters would entail licensing issues that prevent them from being included. Some characters were also rejected for use by Tatsunoko without even explanations being given. Nitsuma states, "We weren't privy to a lot of their decision making process. They didn't share a lot of reasons with us. When they said no and we asked why, they wouldn't tell us, but would give us another suggestion. They disallow characters from Samurai Pizza Cats, despite the high number of fan requests for the latter. The characters who were ultimately chosen were generally characters the team enjoyed during their youth. Capcom also opted to have a roster with a good balance of male and female fighters, as well as a hero-heavy lineup as opposed to villains. Once all the fighters were cleared for use, they could then begin designing a roster of balanced combatants." With regards to the game's fighting lineup, let us now take a bit of time to run through the members of this game's roster. For the first time in history, the roster in this Capcom vs game was not Street Fighter heavy. I feel this could be down to two possible reasons, or simply a combination of both. My first thought is that it could be because Street Fighter 4 was in development simultaneously, and they did not want to overdose the consumer on Street Fighter all over again. But alternatively, maybe the company just never had the same faith in the brand that they once did. Despite all of this, we have Chun-Li and Ryu, who are most synonymous with Street Fighter 2, and rather surprisingly, Alex, the so-called face of Street Fighter 3, being selectable too. Building on the Capcom roster, Morrigan is included in the game, and awesomely, she finally has a new character model, replacing the sprite work that had appeared in every crossover game she had featured in since 1994. Another great addition to the roster is Batsu, the arguable main protagonist from the Rival School series. Adding to the fun, we have the sister of Mega Man, known as Ro, but in a bizarre twist, rather than standard Mega Man being playable, we instead have Mega Man Volnutt from Mega Man Legends. A strange choice, considering Mega Man Legends is not close to being as popular as classic Mega Man or Mega Man X, but I am sure its die-hard fans would try and tell me otherwise. Still, the Mega Man X series gets some representation regardless, as the highly popular Zero also made this roster. On top of these selections, Capcom's superhero known as Beautiful Joe made his fighting game debut. An excellent choice considering this beat-em-up star must fight against a different brand's superheroes in this game. To this day, I still haven't made a Beautiful Joe retrospective. Subscribe and comment below if you think I should change that. The old roster for this game of course does not end there, as we can also play as more strange Capcom fighters. On the more obscure side of things, we have Saki, a 16-year-old girl from the dating sim and hybrid quiz game known as Quiz the Nanero Dreams. The other three representatives are characters from newer Capcom releases that came out in a similar time frame to this game. These include Frank West from Dead Rising, PTX-48 from Lost Planet, and a fighter from Onimusha. Together, these further illustrate that Capcom were no longer choosing to lean into the cast of Street Fighter to try and ensure the success of their fighting games. That rounds up everyone on the Capcom side of things, which means it's now time to look at Tatsunoko's fighters, who I fully admit I don't know a great deal about, as I am too much of a normie and I even have a wife, you know. Included amongst these we have Ken the Eagle, June the Swan and Joe the Condor from a property known as Gatchaman. This show is an animated franchise about a 5-member superhero squad. If you're around my age, you probably vaguely remember an English dub show on Fox Kids known as Eagle Riders, although apparently the original series of the show aired in Japan in 1972 and was first adapted in the English-speaking world as early as 1978, titled Battle of the Planets back then. Further to these, we have characters from a property known as Hakushon. Hakushon himself is an android with a human consciousness. Originally a person, he turned himself into an android to hunt down and destroy robots that have taken over the Eastern world. The show first aired in Japan in 1973, but received a live-action reboot in 2004. Next, we have Polymer from Hurricane Polymer. Once again, this is another Japanese superhero. Originally a regular police officer, Takeshi obtained from scientists a new artificial polymer that was harder than steel. With this material, Takeshi transformed himself into Hurricane Polymer, a costumed hero who fights for justice. This 1974 show was remade in 1996 and later released in English on VHS in 1998. Adding to the insanity, we have a range of characters from a franchise known as Yatterman. This show aired from 1977 to 1979, but would see a remake in 2008. The same year, this game came out. The plot of the show revolves around the mysterious stone known as the Skull Stone, which has pieces scattered all over the earth. Once all pieces are assembled, the stone reveals the location of the world's largest gold deposit. Playable characters in this game include Masked Heroes Yatterman 1 and Yatterman 2, whose goal in the series is to stop the stone from falling into the wrong hands. Another playable character in this game includes one of the show's villains, Doronjo, an attractive blonde who leads the Rombo gang in locating the stone. We also have Hakushon, a genie from the anime known as the Genie Family, which first aired in 1970. Hakushon grants wishes but consistently messes them up due to his own extreme clumsiness. Such a show was localised to English as Bob the Bottle in 1992. Karas is also a playable character from a more modern Tatsunoko property, simply known as Karas, that was released in 2005. The show is a horror story with a vengeance theme. The protagonist Karas is on a quest to slaughter Mikaris to recover a body part of his murdered lover, which is pretty dark. We then have Tekkaman, a character from 1975, who is a space knight, who received their own English adaptation in 1984. The show is set at the dawn of the 21st century, and scientists are on the hunt for a second Earth. This search is hindered though due to issues with aliens, but a scientist designs a system to combat the aliens by augmenting a human with a certain wavelength in 3 Tekkaman, giving them enhanced strength and abilities, resulting in this character right here. The show would receive an even more popular sequel set 10 years later, known as Tekkaman Blade, which would air in 1992. In this one, the Earth is under attack by aliens once more, and the even cooler looking Tekkaman Blade is the star of this property. Both Tekkaman and Tekkaman Blade are playable in this game. We also have Ipatsuman from a 1982 show, and last but not least we have Gold Lighten, a huge gold robot from the 1981 show Golden Warrior Gold Lighten. The story is about a young boy named Hiro Takai who finds a golden lighter which turns out to be the giant golden warrior Gold Lighten, who has the mission to save the Earth from an invasion. Characters do not get more Japanese than giant fighting robots, so it is excellent to see them included here. Anyway, I hope this gives you a brief explanation of who these very Japanese fighters are, and I am sure some more weeby members watching today can shed further light on this crazy roster within our comment section. But as you can see from all of this, Tatsunoko vs Capcom offers a very different roster to any Capcom fighting game released previously. Something else I guess is worth mentioning is that out of all the characters featured in this video, some of them are actually exclusive to each of the 3 different versions of this game. That's right, there are 3 versions of this. The first 2 versions of the game were released exclusively in Japan, which makes a lot of sense considering how Japanese the character lineup is. The first 2 versions, both known as Tatsunoko vs Capcom Cross-Generation Heroes, obviously existed in 2 different forms, an arcade version and a Wii version. Apart from a slightly different character roster, the Wii version of the title contains an exclusive mini-game system for each character to participate in, which adds a little more variety to the title. The home version of the game also includes all the traits of a fighting game of that type. There is a regular arcade mode, a survival mode, a time attack, a versus mode, and everything else you would expect from a game of this kind. In this version, you obtain money throughout the game so that you can purchase a range of features, including unlockable characters, giving the game an extra edge of replayability. As mentioned, sadly, both of these versions of the game would never leave Japan, but the West, along with the rest of the world, would finally receive Tatsunoko vs Capcom Ultimate All-Stars at a later date. On May 6, 2009, Capcom listed 2 mystery games as part of their Electronic Entertainment Expo 2009 lineup. Nintendo Power Magazine revealed Capcom Mystery Game No. 1 to be the North American localization of Tatsunoko vs Capcom Cross-Generation Heroes, with the new subtitle Ultimate All-Stars. The game was playable at E3 of that year, with European and Australian release dates also announced later that same year. There was originally no intention to release the game outside of Japan, but the game got such a positive reaction from fans that it became a must for the company. The release was a tedious process for Capcom, as many Tatsunoko property rights were held by Time Warner outside of Japan, and licensing in North America and Europe were often held by different rights holders. This tedium would lead to time constraints issues that led Capcom to replace the character-specific minigames with Ultimate All Shooters, an expansion of the PTX-40 minigame. An official launch event for Tatsunoko vs Capcom Ultimate All-Stars was held at the Nintendo World Store in the Rockefeller Center on January 23, 2010. This would feature autograph signings by Nitsuma, giveaways, competitions, and a playable demo kiosk. Certain versions of Tatsunoko vs Capcom Ultimate All-Stars were bundled with a Mad Catz arcade stick, which I must say looks particularly spiffing. I wish I had one. In regards to the popularity of this very Japanese game in the West, Capcom community manager Seth Killian expressed satisfaction with the North American sales of Ultimate All-Stars, with him stating Tatsunoko vs Capcom certainly beat the initial expectations. It didn't set any land speed records, but it was a success. And that really says something, considering that we are talking about a game that was not only never coming out, but is a title that most people can't even pronounce. In regards to the game's overall reception from those who would score the game's original incarnation, one publication gave it a solid 8 out of 10, praising the game for both the character lineup and fighting game mechanics. When the later worldwide version of the game was released, Tatsunoko vs Capcom Ultimate All-Stars, it also received positive reviews, with an average score of 85% on review aggregate sites, Metacritic and Game Rankings. The game would also receive a lot of praise for successfully balancing accessibility and depth. GameSpot would state that its use of fewer buttons may seem less complex, but this simplicity belies the depth of each character's moveset. Eurogamer added that compared to the separate buttons for punches and kicks in Marvel vs Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes, Tatsunoko vs Capcom's streamlined approach was moderately easy to learn. The game is a slightly slower and more user-friendly Marvel without losing the ability to pull off crazy 50+ hit combos. Bengachu of Ars Technica wrote that its over-the-top attacks can be huge colourful screen-filling blasts of light and movement, and that combos flash across the screen claiming you landed billions of points of damage. OneUp.com found that each character played in a vastly different way. There are characters who take advantage of sheer speed and long-range moves, while others who use momentum to apply pressure to opponents, and those who rely on a single opportune moment to deal vast amounts of damage. GamePro contrasted the game with Marvel vs Capcom 2, commenting that every combatant in Tatsunoko feels carefully designed to be unique, intriguing, and most importantly, worth investing time into mastering. The game's soundtrack also proved popular, with Game Daily highlighting its fantastic mix of strong techno tunes and dramatic battle themes. Holding all of this information in mind, I hope this gives you a clearer picture of what Tatsunoko vs Capcom is, and why it appeared as a console exclusive for the Nintendo Wii of all things. The game was part of Capcom's new direction to get fighting games back into the hands of the mainstream, and back in 2006-2007, the Wii seemed like the most sensible way to achieve this. Despite all of this though, Tatsunoko is still not a well-known brand in the West. Due to this, unsurprisingly, the release of this game still went completely over many Westerners' heads. The game's high quality and playability was simply not enough to make this one a massive hit. As of November 7th, 2012, Capcom USA Senior Vice President Christian Svensson revealed that Capcom's rights with Tatsunoko had lapsed, meaning that Capcom is no longer authorised to sell Tatsunoko vs Capcom physically or digitally, which is why we have never seen it released on other hardware since its initial releases. Anyway, if you enjoyed this one, subscribe and check out my video on the next crossover game Capcom published, Marvel vs Capcom 3. Or maybe you want to see my video on the cancelled Capcom Fighting All-Stars. Yeah, cheerio!